And let's jump into the topic, because it's, I wouldn't say complicated, but there are a lot of aspects I have to mention. I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with augmented reality. May you indicate that you know what it is or not? So at least half of the audience knows something about it, the other half not. Okay. This slide is already for the ones who know, but augmented reality means that you have, and I will address this a little bit later, that you enhance or modify the reality with elements, basically. You add elements. For music, somehow, this is what we every day do. Someone is talking and while the piano is playing. So these two elements, or I'm on the phone and talking to someone on the phone, and I have a surrounding of noises. So I put together two kinds of reality, one through the phone and the other one which is surrounding me. The real reality and the augmentation, which adds on top of it. So in music it's a normal procedure, but in visual context it's not a normal procedure, because usually you have an exclusive environment for visual perception, like the screen you see here. The screen is a dedicated space, and here is the augmented, or the display world, and outside of this thing is the real world. So the augmentation means to integrate basically these visual elements into the visual environment. And as I said, in acoustic, they integrate themselves, because any acoustic source I have mixes together automatically into the other. And as I said, with the screen and the real world, it's not the case with visuals. The important aspect I want to mention is not so much about technology, but especially about the content and the relationship between technology and the content. It's the same problem we face as a composer. If you have a piano, you compose different music for piano than you would do for violin. There are obvious reasons. For violin, you could hardly play or create a chord of 6 notes at the same time, because there's only 4 strings. So the maximum available notes at the same time are 4, even though with arpeggio. So there are abilities of the instrument. So if you write for a violin, you address the abilities of the instrument, or the superficial add-on is to do something for a violin which is usually not done. I mean, but it's the aspect of our time that we try to treat instruments for things they usually are not built for. But usually you would think of how could I put together, how could I create and use this instrument? And especially interesting, this is for new instruments, like augmented reality. Came up massively, let's say, since 5 years. But there are already cases like Jeffrey Shaw, who presented in Ars Electronica 95, augmented the golden calf. It's a column, and you have a special device and the silicon graphics for €1 million, and with this device you could see the golden calf standing on the column, which was not there in reality. So that was the augmented part. So and that was already there in '94. And with many aspects of this case, artists' ideas are the trigger for new technologies. Artists try out and play with things, and later on they are implemented. Sometimes it's a random case that certain technologies come up. Sometimes it's that the industry looks to the works of the artist and then finds that the ideas are very useful in a certain context. And augmented reality is something which is useful today in publication, but for selling articles, like if you have glasses, you can, with augmentation, you can map the glasses onto your face. Or with IKEA, for example, when the IKEA catalog, you can place. So augmented reality is already infiltrated in our life, and it's not a completely new thing, even though it's still a challenge to create a good use of it. And this is why I mentioned the aspect of content. I will present today examples. One with a work called Maptory, we did at ZKM, entirely with the Staatstheater. One is Orpheus with the artist Evelyn Lieberschek. We did in Munich, Bernd Leckermann and I. And the third one is Tangible Sound project we did 2 years ago. And last but not least, My City, My Sound, which is a special case of a user-generated content, an extension of the thinking of augmentation. And it's a project we continually develop together with OCC in the Interfaces project. There's a new version which I've never run. I only know the old version because it's just freshly developed. But I'll show you some aspects of the context of the content of this work. So the question on the technology side is, especially for you to better extend the potentials of the augmented reality, that we have non-linear narration. That's a term which came up in the last 10 years probably. Non-linearity means that the piece of music usually starts in the beginning, and the time, like in the most time-based arts, continues like a vector, one element after the other. And of course, non-linear narration means you can define the position of a certain work inside your experience. And the term was, as far as I know, invented in the context of archives, and I will show you sound art. Yeah, I forgot one thing. I will show you the work out of the sound art exhibition. I've heard one of you was probably at the ZKM 4 years ago in the exhibition sound art where this work was exposed. It came from the idea that archives, or from the problem how to display archives. We have so much content, and the old way to present it, for an archive to exist, that it was locked away, that there was a few people or a little box with keywords or with the words, a list of words, the cards, and only certain people were allowed to access this archive. Then you have, of course, public archives in the university, where it's the idea of many people visiting the archive. But certain archives are not for, let's say, public use. Either the objects are too problematic, or the way how to experience them is too problematic. If you have an archive with, let's say, 10,000, 20,000 pieces of music, how would you experience them? I mean, for each piece of music, you would walk and search for the CD and then go back. For these cases, it may be interesting to look for other ways and other technologies to bring these to people, especially since the museums tend to present archives more and more. And so this will be an example how to present an archive. And this is the non-linear narration. Narration is an interesting topic because you can, for example, make something more expressive by adding, telling features of a certain object and connecting certain objects through, for example, this was the objects created during the Second World War. This is a feature telling you something, making the works more expressive than the work itself. Of course, you can find out, I'm looking for works which were created between 39 and 45, then you will find out yourself which work at this time was created. But it's this idea of presenting archives that curators create a narrative content around the objects. This is what I basically mentioned. The augmented reality consists of two levels, usually one level of two levels of visuals, real world and augmented content, and the same as I mentioned before, the two levels of sounds, which one was a reality and one is the augmented sound, which is probably written correctly. Then it is interesting what kind of metaphor you create. When you use, for example, a window. I will show you later on this example used in the content of Mentory. This is a real building and there's a window closed with stones. And you can use such a window closed with stone as a metaphor for a story. You can try to find ways, and I will tell you later how this is done. I will just tease you a little bit, think of what is a metaphor. How can I, in the process of creating something, how can I use things which are there every day like a metaphor? And I think a closed window is an invitation of why is it closed? What is the meaning of this window? And I think it's a little bit the quality of such an experience, where how the curator or the creator is taking advantage of metaphors, how well this is thought through, and how well the fantasy is triggered by the metaphor. And another thing augmented reality can do in the last context of my city, my sound, is placing objects at places. It's first of all, it's abstract. If I'm here or if I'm there and take this is a trigger for a certain augmented reality scene, then you would say, okay, it doesn't matter where, at which location I am looking at the augmented part. But when you place such a marker in a certain place in the city or in a certain place of the building, then it matters suddenly. It can be like a gallery where it's very neutral, but as well it can be in certain places outside in the city. And the same is happening when you create sounds. For example, think of a sound. There's a building in the city, like in Karlsruhe. No one is a little
poster or window?
No.
Sense of light?
Plakette. Badge. There's a badge on the building which says that this was the building where Brahms, I think, Second Symphony or First Symphony was premiered. No one knows it. But the building is, or a similar building is still there. So how, if you do an augmented reality there, you can tell a story with this place. And so suddenly it matters where this augmented content is displayed. You can tell stories. Or you can do something else and place something very neutral at certain places, like a physical model. We did this once inside a building and say it's a virtual gallery, and you place a physical model, a gallery of certain sounds and visualizations, and you use the metaphor of a gallery to experience those. So you walk from one work to another, even if the work doesn't have any spatial properties, but you present it as it would have. So I think that's the most important part in working with these technology is how to create an experience. I think that's the best explanation, how to create an experience for the content you are going to experience. Okay, then the technologies which are available are GPS. That means you take the satellite information of a certain location. This is by plus minus 10 meters precise. But it's a quite interesting technology because you can use public space and it's available for everyone. So GPS technology is quite interesting and very stable and reliable. iBeacons with triangulation or without triangulation, they are not as stable, but the good thing about iBeacons is you can use them inside a space. It's a little transmitter of waves, a little box with a long life battery, or the iBeacon itself is a very low power consuming broadcasting device, and you could place it inside or outside of a building. So everyone who comes close to this iBeacon could, if he has the right or she has the right software, can access a certain content. So the iBeacon, and the third is WLAN. Of course, until now these systems are very expensive but very precise. They can be by plus minus 500 centimeters exact inside spaces and outside spaces. And we will look especially in the context of the new cheaper systems which came up just recently, this or last year. We'll see what new content, new work, new technologies are made possible. This is one thing, how to, let's say, locate the trigger. And the way, the type of the trigger you are using are different ones that you have shown you already. This is one of the technologies that's called a mica. It's basically using certain properties of the content of these digits. It's basically this object is a digit, and if you have a certain rhythm here in the digits, you can display information. It's like a QR code, just a bit more primitive. And with this, let's say, modified QR code, you can connect a certain content or trigger a certain content inside an application. The other one would be a photo that I will show soon too. And the third one is quite complex because there's many things still developing. There was a technology by a company from Munich, I don't know the name exactly, which had already implemented environmental identities. For example, if you have a device and you have the little camera here and you are standing in a certain position, you have certain lines or certain properties of the environment which are identified, and then the content is displayed in there. But the problem is, as soon as you move, of course, it's a three-dimensional environment, the properties change quite a lot. And they change to their three-dimensional appearance. For example, this line over here, if it's 10 or 20 meters before the wall, in front of the wall, and if it wouldn't be in front of the wall, if it would be a line painted on the wall, it would, from a certain position, it would create the same situation, but when you move, it would create another distortion or modification of the picture. So it is very complex to calculate three-dimensional properties of an environment, and very promising technology is, for example, the Google glasses or the Windows, the name of the Windows.
Oculus.
Oculus. No, that's not Windows. They have a glasses system as well, and they have a very interesting system to recognize these visual properties, which is incredibly stable. So that's probably the best system on the market, even though these glasses are only as prototypes available, or beta versions available, and not distributed in public in high numbers, and they are 3,000 euro, so quite expensive. So it's not a technology we can rely on today, but maybe tomorrow. So there will be augmented reality in virtual space. That means if you have such an environment, you don't need a marker, you don't need to play something. You just tell the software, place the object, this movie or so, in a certain place inside the space, and then the computer would place it in the proper situation. You could move, and it would still stay at that position. So these are the available top technologies, and the interesting, or the thing we have to consider is GPS does not work inside buildings, it works only outside. beacon everywhere, position tracking only in Vienna areas, so you have to implement the environment, markers work everywhere, photos of course as well everywhere, and analysis of properties of visual environment as well. So there's a certain limitation, but it's not too extreme. So let's come to the examples and the narrative content. Maptory was created together with the Staatstheater Karlsruhe, ZKM, Institute for Visual Media and Institute for Music and Acoustic. I did the music and the augmented reality, and the actors from the Staatstheater did the playing scenes. It's about persons who were living in Karlsruhe and who were quite influencing. And this is where these markers come into place. Let me start the application. And it was certain places where we fixed the person's activity. For example, Heinrich Herz was at the university, or the Brahms building I was mentioning was at a certain building inside the city. Mrs. Benz, I think there was a very old fuel station in the center of Karlsruhe. It was not the precise fuel station she used because she drove by Karlsruhe, but we faked this a little bit because this station was a pharmacy at that time, and she bought fuel at the pharmacy, and this pharmacy was existing at the time. Miss Benz was doing her famous first car ride from, what was it, Pforzheim, from Mannheim to Pforzheim. Yeah. So that means since these persons have their activities in certain locations in the city, there have to be some markers placed in the city or inside the building if possible. For example, let's start with this one. This is the app, that's what you see. And then you look out for markers. Since they are displayed on the city map, you can easily find them. And then you find the marker, and so you see the problems as soon as I go out of the picture, the display spoils. As soon as I tweak the marking too much. Yeah, when I do this, then it's gone. Or when I touch this. So this is Mr. Braun, who invented the Braunsche Röhre, the TV of the 60s and 70s. And let's see how this is. It's him himself. So this is the same person telling other part of the story. And we used this here. It was placed on top of a column to explain what he invented and how this was invented. So we made an actor telling the story. We did the script before, and then did some sounds so that it was working. And this, I try to remember her name.
Lieber Fritz, ich weiß nicht, wo anfangen. Ich bin so unsagbar müde wie noch nie in meinem Leben. Wir haben viel gestritten. Zuletzt haben wir meist geschrieben.
So this is the way you see she's taking the bricks into the window,
Du weißt mir aus.
basically kind of connecting
Heute weiche ich ein letztes Mal
with
ab
the
von der
real
Rolle der
window.
Hausfrau alten Stils in
And this is the wife of the Zara, and he was the inventor. It's a very interesting and very tragic story. He was the inventor of the Senfgas, of muscle gas, yeah. And he invented the muscle gas in the context of, or as well as the, do you know? Fertilizer, yeah. As a fertilizer. It was a certain chemical process, and in this context he found both of this. And he, to get more credits and more success, he supported the use of the muscle gas in the First World War. And she was a chemist too. And she was completely against it, and finally she committed suicide because of, as a protest against his activities. It was really, really extreme. And it's a story she wrote in a letter that is, the letter is still existing, and we built up the story about this letter that was her last words to him. Her complaints about his activities, and so the metaphor of the window was there to show her process of saying goodbye to life, or creating a distance to her husband. And it was in the university where he worked, in Karlsruhe, so it's really a place close to where these inventions happened, and where most of the persons were working. So it was a really historic context to the work.
Just a little question.
Yeah.
The real project, the woman is seen in the real window in the building.
Yes.
If you put your device there,
yeah.
You see the woman in the building.
Yeah. That's this is the way how to present this.
Yeah.
So this building is a real building in Karlsruhe. And you use this project basically as an indicator to place the augmented art inside this area. So you see this experience with this.
You see it on your device.
Yes, you see it on your device. You're in front of the building.
In the middle.
But this is a mixture. You always need a device for display. You cannot. It's not a projection or something like that. It's, you see everything which is augmented through the device. So you need a device.
How do you know where to look for it? Where to look for these spots? There's a map for it.
most of the time the markers indicate the spots, and sometimes we have written some, if there are certain things you have to do, you have also notes.
Is actually the angle and the distance to the window calculated by the camera, which means the camera and the marker, so that this can really be placed into your angle where you're holding your tablet. Let's say you hold it like that, and you have the window on the right angle, and the video comes into the window.
Yeah, this actually is even the angle of the shadow inside the room behind her is calculated too. So if you go from left or right, it's a different shadow of a different view of the room, of the back room, which you see especially in the beginning of the video.
And this is all done by the marker actually.
No, this is done by the photo angle.
Okay.
Because the marker is not present when you point to the window.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you trigger a certain scene by the marker, but then the placement is the photo, for example. That's the way it's done here.
So the frame.
Yeah, here is done different because here is only a marker. That's all you have, and then you have seen that the enlargement is modified by the distance from the marker. So the marker plays a role in how big the object is scaled. And the problem is you should not touch this frame here because then the recognition is faulty. While it is not so problematic if you change the angle in this way, but you should not touch it, or that's especially for markers outside when they are destroyed or so, then they don't work anymore. If part of this black is modified. The content inside it doesn't matter. That's not the problem. It's only this frame and the blocks here which are important. Yeah, we were looking quite a long time researching into different technologies, available technologies for this, and we, especially for the photographic trigger, we were very excited, but we tried it at least 3 years ago, and it's too sensitive to, for example, light. If there's not enough light, it's completely different. For the camera, it's a completely different picture. It doesn't recognize the same situation without with less light than with sunlight, and that's unfortunately the case. Third example, let me show on this because I think it's very well done. It's a book. I like it very much because the book, of course, for us being a lot, and could probably use other indicators, other objects of inspiration, but I know it started already. That was the wrong one. Because when you when I go when I point to a certain marker, as soon as he recognizes a marker, he knows. Then he starts the scene. I have to refresh after the usage of again. Okay. So the book is a certain artist, Lee, who was a strange person. I mean, it's a very interesting story. It's so interesting if you go into this historical person that they are not so famous, at least some of them. But despite of that, they're very interesting. And he was very interested in Indians, American Indians. So we used the book. He was a painter.
Dieser Hengst ist das schönste Geschöpf, welches ich jemals gesehen habe.
Then
Diese Symmetrie,
continue,
diese wunderseltene Färbung.
and then you can see his pictures.
Das ist nicht alles.
And he was a painter and writer, and tragically, I think finally he killed himself as well, because he was not understood with his sujet.
Hast du jemals ein solches Pferd gesessen?
And I like this idea of connecting this book with this kind of picture objects. And actually, there's a coffee house, Cafeterie, which was in Karlsruhe, and which was, I think it was the name of a famous horse. I think that was the thing with the story with the word. It was a name of a famous horse of Chettenham, or so I don't remember exactly. And it's called Cafeterie, and this book was on every table in Cafeterie. So when people did the walk through the city, they could sit down in Cafeterie and then take this and see the pictures of inside the book and listen to his talkings. And the narrations are always very interesting because it's not a biography, it's not doing a biographical talk like I was so and so. It is a bit more. You have to create a picture. What person is this? What did he do? How did he think?
They did wear headphones there.
For the acoustic aspect, they were headphones, even though some things you could listen like this. But in a coffee shop, for example, I found that people would feel disturbed. There was another interesting. There is a fountain, a little fountain in the center, and it was many rich people gave money to create this fountain, and inside were the pictures, the faces of these people. And the one who did this fountain, he was very ironical, so he could contextualize them and modify them into something very strange, and this marker which was placed on the outside of this, maybe you see, maybe try to
dauert sich hundert klein und groß, denn die ist ganz fort. Sie ist im Kranz der Stadt, vielleicht das verschmutzte Land. Ein Brunnen ist's, den sie verschuf, aus Kunst, Sinn und Kulturberuf. Jeder Mann und sehr erbaut, der Verstand in sich beschaut. Der größten Köpfe 14 Stück. Mit stadtbekannter Narrenblick und Riesennasen im Profil, für welche Spatzenprojektil postierte man im Kreis herum, zwischen allen Steinen, Stuhl und schienen ständig wie zum Sport einen ganz bestimmten Ort, was sie nur wollen Garten nennt. Zwar nicht gut und nicht Korsett, nicht Wolke, Hemd.
It takes a long time to understand the story, but you'll see that it is very interesting it can be very interesting to expose certain story in if you try to find identify the metaphors which are there, either which are existing, and you have to find them, or you create a metaphor. Like, for example, what is the actor doing? What is the story the actor is playing? This text you have to create. Or you find some historic text that's possible too. It's very interesting how you can tell and invent stories. And another story, so let's come to the next. his voice, which I personally find as well very interesting, because it was an extreme experience. It's a slogan, a decentralized self-investigative stage with immersive perception. Basically, it was in a bunker in Munich, close to the main station. That's still a bunker which is in use as a security, harbor of a security in case of an emergency system, as an emergency case. And Evelyn Lüberschek, who did the project, basically got the allowance to use 10 rooms there. She divided the 10 rooms in 2 times 5 rooms, and she gave access to individuals. So there was a list with persons, which got 30 minutes of time inside the bunker, and then it was locked. Basically, one person could go in there down the earth, and then it was locked. And this person was 30 minutes with herself, and it was, I think I've forgotten the time. It was probably 6 weeks or 2 months that it was on display. And she was quite busy doing that. We used markers in this project. These markers I've shown already. The interesting part you will see in the photos coming up was the story. Well, Orpheus is a bit abstract. She was telling a story which is not a clear story, because it's it doesn't have a beginning and an end, and so it's quite well adapted to be told non-linear. But she's talking about murder, she's talking about beauty, operations, our desire, doing everything for beauty, abuse. I think this is the abstract story she's telling, abuse in certain context. And she was calling it Orpheus, which I find not directly articulating her idea, basically. Here you see nothing from the content, but let's go through here to see the furniture which she was using, because she was searching for a lot of old medical furniture. And you know this film from Hollywood where you have these horror films where you have the old clinic, psychiatric clinic, some ghosts being presented, and you have people going into this old clinic and seeing all of these devices, and imagination immediately starts. And she was exactly doing that, setting up in the bunker an environment which lets the imagination go off immediately. And the other part, that was the one part of the story, the real environment, and the other part was through augmented reality. Each space had an individual sound, so each room had an individual sound, plus the corridors had basically 6 sound environments, and then the markers were provided throughout the rooms. And this is one of the scenes you see here. It's a bit too less contrasty, but you see here a little person, a little child telling a story.
Du hast mich getötet. Ich war die Erste. Sagt Jane White. Ich stehe im Widerspruch zu jedem Naturgesetz. Ich bin lebendiger als das Leben selbst.
So this kind of stories you heard through the film. So it's nothing really like a biographical note. It's just some thoughts, some collage of certain facts she's delivering, and then, let's say, an experience. This little girl with a knife, I think looked like a knife she had, or a sword in her hand, something to cut. And let me show some more examples of this.
Excuse me, the musical sound is in the room, it's not in the device.
It's both. Yeah, there is a general sound in the room, plus a sound in the device, and you go in with your headphones. I show a film where people enter, you have a better imagination. These are some impressions of the bunker and the objects which are placed there. This was probably a very extreme experience because it was Lenoir, you know, this Weichspüler, the softener. And it had a very specific smell, so the olfactoric aspect was added too. And you enter this room, and then you see the marker in the bathtub, and then this one is without music. I have a couple of seconds, I'll show you the version with music. Then you see this happening. And I find this you probably
Excuse me, this is what I see in the room actually, or this is what I see on my device?
I show on your device.
This is what I see on my device. Yeah, effectively. Sorry.
But since there is a connection, here I have to frame this so that it's still in equal color, but it looks like that this is taking place in here because it's the same color, filmed in the same color. So you have a strong connection between the reality and the, let's say, visual, but now imagined reality. And so this is the same situation in the reality. For towels, if you want soft towels, you put this in the washing machine. Can you imagine? You know the smell of the stuff? Very tough one. Very experience. You probably don't want to use that after this.
But the markers are always black and white, right?
Yes. Yes. To have the best contrast. So this is the presentation of the project by Evelyn Brümmer and some more impressions.
Mein Name ist Evelyn Brümmer. Ich arbeite als Regisseurin und Medienkünstlerin an der Schnittstelle von Theater, Film und Multimedia. Orpheus ist ein Projekt, das genau an dieser Schnittstelle agiert. Es vereinigt das Potenzial von Film, Musiktheater und Videospiel in interaktiven, begehbaren Environments. Wir benutzen dafür Augmented Reality als Funktion und als Besucher funktioniert das folgendermaßen. Ich werde erstmal eingelesen, was meine Aufgabe ist, nämlich, dass ich mit dem Office erspielen kann. dass ich hinabgeschickt werde in eine Sektion, wenn ich zu zweit komme, dann auch jetzt separiert werde von meinem Partner, der in eine andere Sektion geschickt wird. Und ich habe eben 25 Minuten Zeit, in der ich mich frei in den Räumen bewegen kann, in denen ich alles benutzen und erkunden kann, aber auf die Suche nach einem bestimmten Zeichen geschickt werde. Und hinter diesen Zeichen verstecken sich audiovisuelle Inhalte, also Videos, Geschichtsfragmente, Musik, die ich abrufen kann. Und ich bekomme dafür ein Smartphone, eine Scannerfunktion und bin ebenfalls ausgestattet mit Kopfhörern und werde dann in die unterirdischen Räume des Bunkers geschickt und kann mich eben auf diese Reise begeben. Die Frage bei Orpheus ist natürlich die der Grenzüberschreitung, der Separierung, der Limitierung und der Entscheidung. Also das sind alles Punkte, die in das Reglement eingeflossen sind, wie das Projekt konzipiert ist. Also ich werde als Besucher, muss ich erst die Grenze überschreiten, dass ich mich hinabwage in den Bunker. Dann werde ich separiert von meinem Partner, wenn ich dann zu zweit gekommen bin. Ich muss mich entscheiden, in welche Räume ich in welche Reihenfolge gehe. Ob ich so weit gehe, auch die dunklen Stellen und Orte zu betreten, ob ich mich unter den Druck der Zeit stelle oder ob ich mich frei darin bewege und die Zeit außen vor lasse. Und die Zeit ist insofern auch die Limitierung. Und das sind natürlich alles Punkte, die im Orpheus eine Rolle spielen, die wir als Spielregeln sozusagen übertragen haben.
Sie haben eine lange Reise hinter sich, dazu entspannen Sie sich jetzt und genießen Sie Ihren Aufenthalt. In Anbetracht der Metamorphose, die Sie durchlaufen werden, wird Ihnen so oder so keine Änderung.
Es ist eine Kooperation geworden zwischen dem Kulturreferat der Landeshauptstadt München und letztlich dem ZKM Karlsruhe. Und zu der Zusammenarbeit mit dem ZKM ist es dazu gekommen, dass ich das Projekt vorgestellt habe, eben einmal an Bernd Hintermann, der dann Software entwickelt.
Because we are short in time, but I wanted to present some of these content here as well, so that you have a real experience. Let's see. Dieses Papier scheint nochmal Marker durch. Das ist ein bisschen voll sein. Man sieht ja ganz gut, dass Abstand in gewissen Grenzen wird es mitskaliert, aber nicht in jedem Fall.
Aber im Konzept habt ihr dann sozusagen entwickelt.
Genau.
Und du brauchst einen Assistenten, ich kann das halten, wenn du den Marker vielleicht.
Ja.
Also ich weiß es schon.
Das ist wieder links.
Du musst mich ganz einschulen. I need to be trained as an assistant. Wenn wir ihn jetzt sehen wollen.
Man muss sich vorstellen, man ist alleine in diesem Buch und dann kriegt man solche Szenen vorgespielt. Das ist schon sehr.
Imagine you are alone in a bunker and you get things to write.
Maybe this one is no.
I can tell that our audience seems really frightened. They are. Oh well, sorry.
I just had already. I didn't.
Is there an emergency possibility?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, there's I think this marker was placed in this way so that you have a different angle of observation. So that's this one and the last one. Now turn it 90 degrees, other way. Okay, also das Prinzip ist da, Dankeschön. Aber was ich das an der Idee so auch so spannend fand, war die Idee des Bühnenbildes. Achso, what impressed me very much in this work was the idea of the stage. Because she's a professionally trained stage builder, so she designs stage designer. She designs stages for the conventional opera or whatever theater context. But I like here that you are entering the stage. It's an immersive experience. So you are part of the stage. And that you interact with the story in that way, what I refer to non-linear, or you could call it fragmentaric as well. Fragmentary. As well, that you never get a clear story told. You always get snippets, and this makes it much more interesting. It frees your imagination much more than a story told from beginning to end. And she created a very strong stage for this, and it worked very well. It had a very big resonance. Yeah.
Good question. So, but these little stories and the devices, let's say like this, they are always the same.
Yes, yeah. I mean, one marker is always telling the same story. So there's no change in the random.
No variation,
right? Yeah, no variation.
I have a question. Is it possible to use this marker in surfaces that are not plane, but like for example an arm or something like that?
No. When they are, it works as long as it's plain and they are changed in the angle you are doing the marker. But as soon as you do distortion of this, it doesn't work anymore. Because it must, with a straight distortion, you can still calculate the characteristics of this marker, but with this round distortion, it's too complex. The possibilities are too complex. If it's a straight marker change, the possibilities are limited, so it's possible to calculate that.
There's one more question. I'm just wondering, I cannot exactly see what is new in this technology, because for instance, I've been to the Museum for Instruments in Paris. If you go to the Musée de la Musique in Paris, and there's the Museum for Instruments, and you get a headset, and you don't get the screen, but you can have the screen as now. You need not look for markers. As soon as you get close to the object, to a certain object where would be in your system, if there's a marker, but you get automatically the message, so you get the message and you will get the picture on the screen, so you need not look for a marker, but this is exactly what you get in the Cité de la Musique in Paris without looking for
That's
a
a magnetic marker. It's a magnetic.
Yeah, it's automatic. You just walk through and now you see, oh well, I get close to this object, there is something, and then you get the picture and the sound and the story and whatever it is automatically without looking for a marker.
Could be an IV film, for example, but
I mean, what exactly, to say very, very clearly, what exactly is the difference between a video guide, which you find in every museum nowadays, and this new technology? I didn't get that.
That's a misunderstanding. I would say it's the combination of the camera image of the current state of your surroundings and the animation or whatever it is. So you have a view on your iPad with the camera. Let's say on me.
Why do I have to look for markers? I mean, why doesn't this work immediately when I get close to the object where some action is
yeah, well,
prepared?
there are other technologies, like an IP sensor, GPS or something else.
It needs a marker for the frame and the perspective to calculate the picture right in, because if you have an RFID there, which just would trigger it by locating it when you come near, it doesn't know the position of your iPad device. But with the marker, it also gets the twisting.
But essentially it's some kind of audio and video guide through an exhibition, or is it that?
If you're restricted on that, but the augmented reality also lets you interact with it. It's here not here, but you could, if you change the image, you could tell a different story, for example. Yes. You can interact with it. It's different than your
I think
the
difference is, I mean, all the answers are correctly you have done so far. The difference is basically what this is a screen dedicated to project images. And that's a conventional way to how to use a screen. It's a place isolated from the context, and you display something. When I have a column here, and I place a marker on top of a column, and I have a little man standing on top of the column, I put in scene a certain situation, and I interconnect this reality, this column, with the man who's standing on top of the column. And that's not possible with the technology.
No, thank you.
I think it's an isolation of the content. When we see a movie on the iPad, it's an isolated visual content. Wherever it's always the same. It doesn't connect to the reality.
Right.
And this is only.
Sorry, it takes a little bit longer.
No, it's a wonderful question because it's
sometimes.
The central part of it. Right, thank you. Okay, now I would like to, there are two ways now to continue. Which way should I take? Tentative sound, let's take that because that's the same marker system and the visual system. And there the idea was to use a physical model which creates a sound, using a 3D animation. And it's an interesting case because we developed a rotating marker. Basically, if you imagine there, you will see a little movie if you have this marker, and inside is a second marker, and this is rotating, and it's indicating a clock. And if you have this, you can synchronize movies with that. So if a second person comes here, he starts at the same position of the movie. If a third person comes here, he starts with the same position of the movie. And this we have done exactly because we have a speaker here, and the sound is distributed acoustically. So if you would use the normal marker system, everyone would start when he starts to launch or to trigger the marker. And that would be non-synchronized audio and video content. And with that we were able to do that. And I show you a picture, an example here. This is even little kids in Great Britain, where was it? At the West Coast, Lee. You must know. Cardiff, yeah. That was in Cardiff, and a little pair of twins were interacting with this marker, and they were kind of, you could leave them alone for 1 or 2 hours. They were fully concentrated on the stuff. And this is an example of the physical model. It's a membrane and an animation of a membrane. And what is not so clearly visible here is that it's a 3D model and the rendering is done in real time. So it's not a movie, it's a rendering. So the animation is created at that time you see the picture. So that's a difference to playing a movie. And this is another example. I have both as a video, but these are without sound. But you see the technology, you see the turning marker in between. And this is a multi-string physical model.
Does it also sound? Does it have a sound, the physical model?
Yeah, there comes noch. I have another example where the sound is displayed as well. But I didn't have an excerpt of this movie. So now it should be a model of this sound. It's not very spectacular, but it was great. Why we were doing this animation is we were experimenting in visualizations of these objects, these three-dimensional objects. And the interesting part of it, we all know this, the interesting part of this was that you had a three-dimensional experience of the object. It was actually a real three-dimensional object without three-dimensional displaying technologies. So how would you display this? Usually in the film you see one perspective and then you believe that it's three-dimensional. But here you could experience the three dimension through moving and observing the angle of the object. So that was the reason we chose this technology.
The rotating marker, is it a virtual one or it was a physical one?
It was like on the one screen I showed, one iPad was carrying the marker, basically as a continuous moving, and the other iPad was reading the marker. Or the other iPads were reading the marker. So it was an iPad which was displaying the animated marker.
You could only observe the object, you could not interact directly by hand.
Could not interact.
Okay.
But
so that the object could become a musical instrument or something like that.
Yeah, you could not.
Then next year.
Yeah. I wonder how useful it is because. Save me. Yeah, I don't know how, because we do a lot with we do a lot with interactive media, and I don't think that interaction is always a good thing. Even in music, sometimes when I teach electronic music, I would tell the students first to do a non-interactive piece so that they learn how to build and create sounds. Because when you work with interaction, you focus on interaction, on the quality and of the options of the interaction. And you miss out the quality of sounds. And this is what I would put in question. When you interact, you focus on the interaction, the way you interact with the object, and not so much on the properties of the object. Of course, interaction can be a way to experience the properties of the object as well. So I'm not sure of what to think of, but this was not. Well, you could see the interaction was the observation. That's an interaction. You could decide where and how to observe. You could not infiltrate into the object itself, but at least you could observe it. Then now I come to sound art, and this will be the last visual. And really, I will be very quick with my city, my sound, because the time is running pretty fast. But sound art was a project created for the exhibition at the fair, and it was the idea of presenting an archive. Interacting with sounds, and as I mentioned before, we are continuously thinking of how can we interact and display content, especially with massive content, because we have many archives and many artists distribute their archives to their parents. Most of the archives are digitized, so that's the format we have them. And this was one solution we found so far. It was built by Wintermann, Julia Gerlach, and Sila Waage, and augmented reality work was done by Wintermann. And what you see here is the same, a real-time rendering of the animation of the sound, amplitude of the sound file, the column. So you have there's a column, and on the x-axis, basically the amplitude is displayed, and since the column the time is running from the ground upwards, you have a timeline of, let's say, a couple of seconds displayed. And interesting, we start because I put it to sleep. The visitors had an iPhone, had an iPad and headphone, and you can see it. It's even polyphonic. And there should be a text displayed. This explaining what kind of sound it is. So you could even create a mixture between several sounds with this. So now here is hello. On Emo, for airports. Yeah, I have no idea where the text is going. Probably it's only working when it's, there it is, when it's one word. So what you have here, can you see that? Or is it too low? So on the bottom you have the text explaining what kind of piece it is, and then you have to combine with the sound. And as I said, the rendering is done in real time as well, and as you see, it's a 3D render. Yeah, it creates a certain experience. Of course, we are used to interact with amplitude information of sounds, especially if you deal with music. But I think it invites to this way, the common amplitude invites you to interact and to look at the sound in a bit different way. Not unusual, but in a bit different way. And there were, let's say, I think, 64, as far as I remember, black ground with 64 of the markers, and then the people could walk around and observe the works. Okay, and last but not least, there is My City, My Sound, which is historic in itself, but we have now modified it and put it with OCC together, and I'm very much looking forward to the new solutions, even though it was a very quick and fast process. What I think is interesting here, this is the only work I've presented so far where user can generate their own content. That means that everyone in the world can download the software and create a work of his own soundboard. And this is, for me, a strong part to feature this, because it's an instrument for others to create content and to make use of this facility. And it can be, well, whatever. And whatever is simply said, but the trick here is to find a reason why someone wants to experience sounds in certain places. That's basically the question here. And of course, you know, Noah Schäfer, he would have a reason to experience the environment itself. Probably would need this tool to experience the sound of a location, because the sound is already there. But for example, think of a place in the center of the city, and this place while it's raining, this place while it's covered with snow, this place 3 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, during noon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It sounds completely different. Simply this little idea tells what the potential of the sounds of locations, or you superimpose another sound. For example, we have done, let me look at this photo, try to be a bit quicker. skip a lot of this. Yeah, I have one idea which is not fulfilled yet, but for example, fountains. If you have fountains in your city, you could place the fountain in Centre Pompidou, Ligue de Saint-Phal, for example, there, or the famous in Rome, famous fountain. You place in the fountain another fountain of another place, of another city. I think there are many metaphors to find and to fulfill. Here is, for example, one, and this was an art show we had. The city is the star was the title, and we did some performances in the city, and some objects were placed somewhere. This was the size of a real house. It was placed there in the center of Karlsruhe. The cars were there, and here this was a performance. It got world press coverage because it got a punishment because it was on the wrong place. Ticket, yeah. And it was in every press, international press. At least on the internet. But they did an interview with the policeman who wrote this ticket, and he said he was aware that it's an art exhibition. So this was a performance, and this art project, for example, we conserved with this Massédi sound, placed little photos, text on a certain location, kind of documenting the activities of this exhibition, and you could walk there and experience the exhibition after it's gone, because of course the objects are not there anymore. But and this is the new feature we implemented together with OCC. What's the name of the Media Electronic. And this feature is that before we had a certain place of the sound, and you enter the sound, enter the place, and you activate the sound. And now the sound is automatically activated, and it's you can program it that way that the amplitude is increasing while you enter the location. So at this point, you would have two sounds: the sound of this location, very soft, and the sound of this location, very very loud. So you would have a kind of mixing, real-time mixing of certain sounds, and that's we are very much looking forward to how the people will react with this. Media did a project is doing a project with
three walks in the center of Athens. The second project we're doing of this kind of 3 walks in the center of Athens, in which you both documentary evidence, interviews, and sound compositions made, especially for these walks. So it's a very mixed experience. So you can walk through one of these circles, might be an interview with someone living in the region, and as you out of that zone, you suddenly get a sound composition that maybe uses field recordings or maybe even not, etc., etc. So it creates a kind of composition of a walk. It's a walk that in itself is a variable composition experience as you place the stuff on the map and people can move through it in different ways.
Mm-hmm. And
so they are wearing
headphones. Yes, you have a mobile device and a headphone. It should, I'm not sure if the version is able to play movies.
Yes, there was video.
Yeah, the last year already. Yeah, so you can use photographs, play movies, and put the sound in there. Text. Yeah, that's 4 formats. Yeah. So you could create quite a rich format. And there was one thing, a project I tried to make make happen quite a long time ago with the city of Karlsruhe, but until now it was not possible. I would call it city stories, and that is something we wanted to go to the homes of old people and ask them if they have a certain location in the city where they have a certain experience. And they should tell this experience of a certain location, maybe where they found the first love, where they had the first kiss, where they had I don't know, where the bomb was thrown and they were nearly killed, or whatever specific experience they had. And it's, for me, it's a very nice way to communicate with these people and to have a historic picture of things, and which are individual and not focused on historic facts. We have history books. We didn't want to end with this project. Add another history book. It was the idea of how is our environment, our city, experienced by other people, and especially by other times. I mean, can young people as well, but old people have different stories because we don't have the reality anymore. These old people have 50 years ago. We have done one project with an institution in Grenoble. They had actual recordings from the, I think, 20s or 30s of Grenoble, how the city sounded at certain places. So we implemented the project these sounds. All sounds should be there on the mycityMySound.de. mycityMySound. What is it? Let me quickly call these. That's ZKMD. So you could call this site, and at least you can see there's no internet. You could see the sounds which were updated, loaded so far, and you could maybe think of doing a project yourself or doing a project with others. If you have some project you wanted to do for 10 years, since 10 years, and you didn't find the right tool, here it is. Okay.